Welcome everybody to this first Q&A. So I apologize if there's a little bit of if if there's a few technical difficulties along the way. Essentially, how this is going to go is I have a few questions to start. I have a few I'm kind of practicing. I have some rapid fire questions and then some longer answer questions, and then I'll open the floor to you. So you can either throw your messages in the chat or I think there's a way to do a raise hand button or to unmute yourself, and then you can just ask the question. So if that works with everybody, we'll get started. So thanks for joining. I'm Steven. Again, first time doing this. I even set up a nice background to try and get y'all official. Anyways, so welcome. And then our guest today is Malindi Elmore. So recently set the Canadian marathon record in 2:24, which is amazing, in Houston. And then you're also a 2004 Olympian. So that was Athens in the 1500 meter. So a big distance or a big range, which is awesome. And it just shows how running development is so important. Anyway, I'll stop rambling and I'll do a few rapid fire questions. So my first one is, what's your most memorable race?
Oh, probably Houston.
Houston.
Yeah.
Favorite workout?
I like kind of a mix of paces. So I guess like something like tempo and then 400s. Yesterday, for example, I did 3K tempo, 4 times 400, 2K tempo, 4 times 300, 1K tempo, 4 times 200. So cut downs with mix of pace.
Whoa, okay. So next question, favorite running route?
In Kelowna, I love to run along the rail trail that runs like from Kelowna basically to Vernon. There's this great trail and it runs along the lakes and it's spectacular.
Awesome. Is that the one in the picture on your website?
No, actually, we have a lot of really good running spots in the Okanagan. That one I think is down closer to Penticton on the KVR rail trail, but it's south of here. It's just an hour drive to get to, so or probably more, probably 80 minutes. So I don't really go there very often.
Okay. Least favorite workout?
I do not like doing time trials.
Oh, I'm with you, especially by yourself.
Yeah.
And then last one, favorite shoe to run in?
Oh, sorry, that the sound cut out a bit. Well, I'm actually not going to say a favorite brand because uh, since I buy my own shoes right now, I feel like that would be giving too much credit to any one shoe brand. But I would say that I've been testing a lot of shoes lately, and there's some really really exciting things out there. I think that's going to favorably line up against the Vaporflies. But in general, like a good neutral shoe from several of the different leading brands are all good shoes.
Okay, fair enough. So if anyone on here works for a shoe company, Malindi needs a sponsor.
Yeah.
That's the message I'm getting. Okay, we'll go into some longer answers. So back to Houston, the most memorable race. Can you just walk us through your race plan and just how that went? Because I think a lot of people are really curious about, because you were in the lead pack for the majority of the race.
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny because so I knew going into the race that based on workouts that we were targeting 224 to 226 kind of range was sort of where all my workouts were falling, and it just depended on race day execution and weather and pacing and of course an element of luck. And at the technical meeting, and actually to back up, I knew there wasn't going to be a pacer for the range that I was trying to run. So I was prepared to just go and kind of run and do my own thing and see how that kind of fell out. But at the technical meeting the day before, they indicated that there was going to be two male pacers for the lead pack of women going out at 222 pace. And I was kind of like, oh, that's a bit rich. Like, I need to not get that excited. So based on that, I was like, I'm just going to go out and just kind of feel it and just get into a good groove. And I think that sometimes we can be too reliant on our GPS watches to tell us what we need to do, and instead of just kind of feeling it. So I'm a big believer in kind of the art side of pacing. Like your mind and your body need to work together to find that comfortable groove and something that you can believe you can do for a really long time, instead of like, I have to run 325 or 326 per kilometer for 42K. So in the end, I actually ended up in the lead pack. I don't know what happened. They obviously decided not to go 222 pace, because at one point about 5 or 6K in, I was ahead of the lead pacers. There was one woman who was a minute up the road, and I don't know who she was running with. And I kind of looked back and I was like, well, the two lead women's pacers are behind me a couple steps, and then the whole pack, like the chase pack, is right there. So I guess this is my race. I guess I better just tuck in and race the race that I'm in. So it worked out perfectly for me, despite the fact that I was prepared for it to not go that way at all, and that I would be mostly on my own. I wasn't on my own at all. I had a great group to run with.
Yeah, because that's a pretty deep race down in Houston too, like between the half marathon and the marathon. So I guess
Oh,
you're not alone.
the first 5 or 6K is wild, because you've got the half marathon and marathon starting together, and men and women starting together. So you're just like, when I got off the line, it was about a minute into the race, and I look over and I've got Sarah Hall on one side of me and Natasha Wodak on the other side of me. And if they were doing the half, and they both ran, 68, 69 minutes, I was like, whoa, you gotta settle, like, you're not running a half marathon, just get into your group. But there were probably 500 people in front of me at that point in the race, which doesn't usually happen in a road race. So it is really easy to get sucked in and run probably too fast the first 5 or 6K. So I had to kind of give myself like a bit of a talking to, especially when 5K in, I almost missed my first bottle, because it was still so chaotic. You were still just trying to find like a straight line to run and not trip over people. And then I had to again be like, okay, you need to get nutrition, you need to fuel, settle down, calm down. So it's a pretty good way to run, because it kind of flies by the first bunch of kilometers.
Yeah, I always enjoy running with people, and I even try and talk to people around me. Some of them appreciate it, other ones definitely don't. Uh, and they're like, shut up. So what was your reaction when you knew you had the record and when you got to that finish line?
Well, I kind of knew early on at about 10K that it was feeling really good, and I just had this feeling I was going to have a really great day, and I just couldn't see um I couldn't see not being able to stay on that pace for a really long time. So I think just the whole race, it just felt like just enjoying the process and enjoying racing and feeling like it was such a great day. That when I got to the finish line, I think it wasn't a big surprise, right? Because I knew all along I'd had checkpoints, I'd seen my splits, I saw the halfway split. So I just knew that was kind of what I was going to run. It just probably the last couple K, I had to work a bit harder to dip under 225, because I'd come off the pace a little bit. We had hit a really strong headwind for the last probably 10K, and it was actually a bit of a hilly section. So a couple of my Ks were a bit slower. And then with I hit the 26-mile mark, and there were there was the woman who won was already way ahead, and then there were two women right in front of me. And so that at that point, I had to again give myself a little talking to, because as a former 1500-meter runner, I thought I can't not try and kick the last 300 meters and move up a spot. So so I really dug deep in the last probably 300 meters to sprint, to sprint the finish, and caught the woman who was in third to take third. And I was more excited about that than the time in a way, because you hate to think you just settle and accept your place or accept the performance and just kind of cruise in. And it's fun to, like finish and think, yeah, I actually like pushed myself and got the most out of myself on the day.
And I guess it helps it because you said you don't like time trials. It wasn't a time trial race because you were in there racing other people, which to me is key to getting any good time.
Mm-hmm.
So for those of you who haven't seen the splits for the race, Melindy's on Strava, so you can go back to whenever that was, January, probably the last race that anyone actually ran, and and check it out. So kind of shifting gears just a little bit, what do you attribute your recent success on the roads to?
25 years of training and racing. And I think the experience of having been a track runner in the past, and then taking a break and taking up triathlon to build endurance and aerobic base. And I think for me too, the fact that like I just on March 13th, which I feel like was like truly Black Friday, I had a birthday, which I turned 40, but I think the fact that I had 7 or 8 years where I didn't really do a lot of specific run training has meant that my body hasn't had the same amount of pounding and beating up over the years that if I had just run straight through from being, 12 or 13 when I started running. So kind of the break was good, the triathlon was good, and then the speed background in track was good.
Great. And so my last question before I open it up to the floor, you were set to race the Ottawa 10K. I have some insider information that that was going to happen before likely being selected to the Tokyo team. So what are you doing now to reset now that all the races have been canceled and things have been postponed to next year or to the fall?
Well, I think like a lot of people was initial like just overwhelmed by what was happening in the world. And um, if there were a few weeks there where you just kind of felt a bit lost because you kind of lose your direction without having something on the table short term. So I took a few weeks of just kind of running as I feel and getting used to the whole new reality, which in my family includes having my kids who are 1 and 5 years old around all the time and having my husband home all the time, like totally different change, right? And then once I kind of accepted that and was able to figure out our new life, my new plan is just to break down the next 6 months into kind of manageable chunks. And although there might not be races this spring, I was going to do Ottawa, and as I plan to do the Winnipeg Half Marathon and the Vancouver Sun Run, and I was going to do the Montreal Half Marathon as well. It's still kind of going back to the training that I would have done for those races because we purposely plan them to help me for next fall and next winter, which in my case I think is getting back to a little bit of faster running, working on my anaerobic threshold again, dropping my mileage, moving away from specific marathon training again for a little while. And that's what we did last spring, and that really helped me once I went back into marathon training to be at a different level again. So even though there aren't the races, still training as if we were hitting those benchmarks without having to do the time trials.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to avoid that as long as possible. I know a lot of people in Ottawa right now are doing time trial virtual races, but that
Mhm.
is not for me. So I'm going to open it up to some questions. I have a few more, but I want to get other people to participate. So if you have a question, I think you can raise your hand on the side where it says participants. If not, throw it down in the chat or, or wave at the camera and I may be able to see you. Uh, well, people are thinking of their question. I'll ask one more. You mentioned that you have a kid, 1 and 5-year-old,
Mhm.
and that and that everyone's working from home, and you have a job yourself. So how do you balance those things? What's your kind of key to success?
Right now is very different than normally. I'm just trying to prioritize right now what needs to be done. Like I think for my family, I have to just mostly focus on my kids right now and spending a lot of really good quality time with them and keeping them out of trouble because my 1-year-old is just like an absolute terror. If you turn your back on him for a second, he's destroyed the house. And my 5-year-old needs some challenges and some routine and some structure still. So I've had to kind of shift some of my own goals to side. I'm still running every single day, but I used to run twice most days. And so basically, like if I get one run in a day, that's fantastic. And if I can get up early and do some of my coaching and some of my work, I can't really get up too early because my 1-year-old gets up at like 5:45. So it's hard to beat him up. But just like being flexible with that and again focusing for me on what's the most important thing right now, which really is my family, my little kids.
Great. So we'll start with Teresa. So I
And
think
of course, Teresa's son focusing on coaching him well.
Yeah, you kind of know who I am. I've got teenagers, so my challenges are very different than yours.
Yeah.
So I have a few questions, but I'll just start with one so other people can have a turn. So you started on the track, shorter distances, and then did triathlon and Ironman, and now you're doing marathon and longer distances. How, like, what's your passion, or has your passion changed over the years? Like, as you've just like developed more endurance, or like, how has that process been for you? I'm really curious.
Yeah, that's interesting. So if you had asked my 20-year-old self if I
Mhm.
ever imagined racing an Ironman or racing a marathon, I would have thought that was insane.
Mhm.
I really was like a middle distance 8:15 runner. I thought long runs were terrible and tempo runs, and like I didn't really gravitate towards those longer races until I was much older. But I think you kind of touched on it. Like I just developed different passions over time and
Mhm.
didn't really have like a path that I intended to follow. It was just like something would come to kind of a natural close, it seemed like, and I'd reevaluate and then get excited about a new goal and start the training and learn more about it, and then just focus on the process of getting stronger and fitter for that, whatever that was. So originally it was Olympic distance triathlon, then gravitated towards the 70.3s. And then I thought,
Mhm.
well, if running is my favorite and best discipline in triathlon, I might as well do an Ironman. And
Mhm.
then did an Ironman. And then I thought, well, if the marathon part of the Ironman is my favorite discipline, why not just do a marathon?
Easier,
Yeah,
but
honestly,
not.
it actually is easier. There's nothing like getting off the bike in Ironman with your hip flexors already totally wrecked
Mhm.
and being completely depleted and dehydrated and exhausted, and it's the heat of the day and you've already been exercising at an intense level for 6 or 7 hours, and then expecting yourself to go run hard.
Mhm.
With the marathon, you start off fresh, and you know your nutrition and your hydration is all in balance and your
Yeah.
legs aren't dying. So I actually find like my two experiences of running a marathon have been way less painful than my two experiences of an Ironman.
That's interesting because some people say it's the other way around. Some people, especially with ultra marathoners, they say, "Oh, that stuff's all easier than running a road marathon." But we have a question from Ron in the chat. Can you provide some details on your training for Houston in terms of training volume, workouts, long run distance, time, etc.?
Okay, great. Hi, Ron. Well, I would say my Houston build didn't go entirely to plan. So I had planned to do Toronto Marathon, and in I guess it was October 20th, right? Yeah, it was exactly 3 months before Houston. And so I started the build for that. To back up, like I mentioned earlier, I did a spring track, kind of, or not track, a spring speed
Hmm.
focus with some 10Ks on the roads, a half marathon, and I actually ran a 5K on the track in July in LA, which was reminded me why the 5K on the track is incredibly painful. And then took a 2-week break, and then I started my build for Toronto on like just right the end of July, like the August long weekend, I guess, July, August. And that went really well right through to 10 days before Toronto, and I got hamstring tendinopathy in my semimembrosis tendon in my hamstring. So the builds were very similar actually, but I had almost like 2 builds with a 3 or 4 week break in between, and then we kind of did an abbreviated version. So my mileage is at the peak but about 100 to 105 miles, 165K was kind of like my big weeks. And I would say we averaged around, I think in miles, sorry, because I went to university in the US, so I always still think miles. My mileage was around 190 miles, so 145K like average, I'd say, over those 8 week, like the big meaty 8 week builds. Probably did 4 or 5 days a week of double days. We would do one big workout every 2 weeks is how we would focus it. And I don't know if Dylan's on here because I can't see him, but I see his name. But so if Dylan's was that we don't really think of it as like a long run. We would do a workout every 2 weeks with a significant or increasing percentage of that at marathon pace throughout the build, so that by the end, my last workout, for example, 16 days before Houston was 3x9K with 90 seconds rest in between with a warm up and a cool down. So it adds up to, what is that, like 37, 38 kilometers. But trying to really, really, really hone in on marathon pace and effort and work on fueling and hydration throughout. So another workout, for example, they would kind of build throughout the build. So I would even start at, say, 6 times 3K at marathon pace with a kilometer easy, then 6 times 4K, 5 times 5K, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 kilometers, and then the big meaty 3x9K, which I did before Toronto and I did before Houston both times. So those are the key sessions, and everything else in that 2 weeks is supporting that session in and out of it. So we kind of keep the mileage high into the workout. So I would go in loaded and then freshen up out of it 3 or 4 days on the back end, and then kind of back into the rhythm of things.
Thank you. Great. So Jared, you have your hand up.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. So first, Malindi, just want to see I see your name right. First, I really admire your dedication to the sport and your accomplishments. It's amazing. First of all. Hello?
Hi, thank you. We lost you.
So, did you hear what I said? I said,
yes,
first I wanted to.
We heard you.
Oh, you heard? Sorry about that.
No, all good.
Okay. So, my question is, and this is something I've noticed, there's a lot of emphasis on the mentality of you can do anything if you put your mind to it. And I love asking elites this question. Do you feel like anyone, if with the right, if they just train hard enough, could go to the Olympics? Because it's like that mentality where, well, it's like if you just worked hard enough, you could go to the Olympics. But the thing is, that gives kids a false fallacy of, well, if you just dream high, you could do it. I just feel like there's a sense of like, there's a talent aspect there. I wanted your opinion on.
Jared, you're crushing my dreams, man.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think you're right. I definitely encourage people to work hard, but to maybe have realistic goals. And for example, like there's a lot of things I'm not good at, and I just, they don't come naturally to me playing the piano, despite the fact that I did 10 or 12 years of piano practicing and lessons, and I haven't done it since I was a kid, but I can't play piano anymore. And it wasn't easy, right? And running for me has always been easy. And I ran, for example, in grade 9, I wasn't really training much, and I was playing soccer and field hockey and all sorts of sports. And my coach had seen me run in elementary school, and he is actually the coach who coached me all the way through when I retired from track the first time. So he was trying to recruit me. He was the high school coach. So he came to a soccer game, and he's like, you should really be on the high school cross country and track team at KSS Columbus Secondary School. And I was too busy doing other sports. But I said, okay, I will race, but I'm not going to train, because I liked racing, but I didn't like training at that time, and I had other sports. So he put me in a race when I was in grade 9, the BC championships. It was the only weekend that worked for me to actually do. So I aged up. I ran against the senior women because that worked with my soccer schedule. And I ran 2:09 in the 800 and 4:26 in the 1500. And that was off of soccer. So he was like, that's really good, he tells me. And I had no idea what that meant. I was like, oh, okay, cool. And anyways, so I would say like from an early age that running did come easily, and that we were able to kind of develop that over the years.
You already crushed my 1500 PB right there. Just
well, I guess that's the thing. We have to embrace the talents that we do have. Mm-hmm. Whereas, I don't know, I just, as opposed to ignoring them, right? But some people just choose to do something else that they just love more than their own talents. I just find it so fascinating. And the aspiration to go to the Olympics is very refreshing if you have the aptitude to do it. So you did, so that's great.
Mm-hmm.
So next question, thanks Jared. In the chat, it's from Dan. Hey Dan. So still early days, he says, but are there any races in the fall you're contemplating? Hopefully they happen. Other than the Olympics, are there shorter, medium-term goals that are keeping you motivated?
Yeah, thanks Dan. Yeah, oh my gosh, I so hope that we can have a little normal, return to some normal living again in the fall, but we'll have to see. If there are opportunities, I would really love to run Toronto, since I didn't get to run it last year. And I think it would be super, super cool to run the big Canadian marathon. And to be honest, I actually have some concerns about leaving the country for a while until we know things are under control. But that being said, I'd love to go to Alan Brooks's race, because he's done such a great job of promoting the sport. And I have unfinished business from last year. And I would also love the chance to see if I could improve my my race execution and training. And it would be great to go into Tokyo in 2021 again, feeling really comfortable with my approach to training, because to the race too, because I've only done the two, and it would be great to have a little bit more experience, and then to feel like, I could do something really cool in Tokyo, because we've kind of backed it up by a few performances.
Absolutely. So I don't know if anyone else has other questions, but I have, or we'll go to Teresa again. Go ahead.
And Karen.
There we go. You guys hear me?
Yep.
I just have to show off my my sweatshirt here. So yeah, as Malindi mentioned, she is my son's coach at UBCO, which is pretty cool. And he is doing his time trial tomorrow, as I know he's supposed to do one this week. So
awesome.
we might join him, his brother and sister.
Time trials, I just don't like to do them.
I know. We spent some time mapping out areas right around here that have the least elevation. So we found something with 3 meters or something. So anyway,
that's good. That's impressive.
And I've also promised not to embarrass him on this call. So
it's all good.
Anyway, my question for you, in line with coaching, is what, and I know I've actually read something that you posted in light of the scandals a few months ago on, it was either Twitter or Instagram, but what defines success for you as a coach? So you're working with the university, obviously cross country team, which has been incredible experience for my son. So how do you determine that, and what do you love about it, I guess?
Well, first of all, I really do love coaching, and I think that when I retired in 2012 from the track, I was so just exhausted and burnt out from racing and track, and took a big break. And then I feel like coaching has pulled me back into being a competitive athlete again, because I got into coaching around then and was really not at all interested in my own goals for a long time, and felt like I could see why you get so invested in helping other people. And I just really love being a part of these athletes' journeys and helping them. And it's sort of I don't expect everyone to have the same kind of goals as I do, but if I can help them foster their love of running and competing, and also just building that relationship that's so important between people, that being a good role model for younger high school, collegiate athletes, all of that I think is really a fantastic opportunity that I'm so grateful to have. I was really super lucky, because as I mentioned before, I had this coach that started coaching me in 92 when I was in grade 8, or 93 when I was in grade 8. And he, to me, is the ultimate, put him on a podium of how every athlete he's coached, I think, over the years, which now has got to be in the hundreds, because he's been doing this since the early 80s, would talk about the positive impact that he's had on their lives. And although he helped me and a few others get to to the pinnacle of the sport in the Olympics, I would say his reach has been so beyond that, in terms of what he's been able to help other people through running, to be their best in something, right? Whatever that is. Being your best isn't, like Jared mentioned, isn't maybe making the Olympics, but that doesn't mean that we still try to do our best at things.
That
Awesome.
was a great question. And for me, I'm applying to law school, and I'm hoping I can run on a U Sports team. So I won't make UBC, but maybe, some of the other schools. We'll pass it over to Ron, who has his hand up.
Oh, hi. I was just curious regarding your GPS-free Mondays. To me, it sounds like probably the most fun runs you could probably do. Just leave the watch at home and just go. Is that the same for you, or when did you sort of implement that? Is it only since we're sort of in a downturn in terms of race preparation, or have you been doing them for quite some time anyway?
Yeah, Ron, where do you live?
St. John's, Newfoundland.
Oh, awesome. Okay, I've never been there. It's hilly in St. John's, isn't it?
It's hard to find a piece of flat ground to run on here, yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. So in BC where I live, unless I drive somewhere to the rail corridor, which was where I would obviously do my training, I run out my door, it's like 7 to 8 minute kilometers. And I love running out my door, and I love running in the trails.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I like to call it GPS free, because your body, like physiologically, if you're running on a hill and you're running 7 or 8 kilometers an hour, you're still breathing hard, your muscles are still working, your heart is still pumping. It's just that your watch isn't giving you nice, pretty splits. So if I go out and run an hour, 80 minutes in these trails, it's super refreshing and it's fun. And that's what's, I think, kept me in the sport this long, is that it's actually fun and I actually love doing it, instead of worrying about how far or how fast I go on an easy day. But I realized that like 60 minutes or 80 minutes of doing that is similar impact on me as an athlete as it would be if I was running faster. So I kind of equate it. I'm like, well, I ran 60 minutes. I'm going to call it a 5-minute kilometer effort, even though they were like 7-minute kilometers. And yeah, I love GPS Free Monday, and Graham, so he's my husband and he's coaching me now, but he'll often just be like, if I'm, having an off day, like, just go for a GPS Free day. And I think we need to just get away from these watches all the time, because they can own us, right? And I grew up in an era where, and probably everyone on this conversation, where we didn't have GPS watches and we still ran, and I didn't even used to time my runs. I just go out for a run and run as far, as long as I wanted to, and then came back when I was ready to, instead of like being a slave to it. So I think that's part of embracing the process.
Okay, thank you.
But if it's not on Strava, it doesn't count. No, sorry. I'm kidding. Karen.
So nowadays.
Yeah, Karen.
Yes. Hi there. I'm a runner from Mexico, living in Vaughan, Ontario. So you're a truly inspiration for a lot of runners, including me. So thank you. I'm honored to be here. I have this question. So all of us have this moment in our life when we say, aha, I can run a marathon. And then I start working towards that objective. For you, at which point of your career you started to think that you could make it to the Olympics team? And how long did it take you to get there, to this point where you have this amazing 2:24, I think, time? That's my question.
Yeah, thanks. It's funny, because I really was heartbroken when I didn't make the 2008 and the 2012 Olympics in the 1500, and decided to retire. And when I retired from that, I had like hung up the spikes and had accepted what had come of my running, and was happy to move on, and didn't really harbor any regret or any desire to be back at that level. Like, I went back to school and got a degree in education. I started teaching. I had my 2 boys. I got into triathlon. Like, I was just kind of going with the flow of my life. And it was only when Oliver, who's my almost terrible 2-year-old, he's lovely, but he's a handful. When after he was born, he was 3 months old, and I was just on a run in my trails that I talked about, GPS Free Monday, where I run with my husband. It was like the first time we'd run together, and I said, maybe I'll do a marathon, because I just thought it would be fun to do a marathon, not to have really competitive goals in it. And that was September 2019. So fast forward a couple months, I ran 2:32 in Houston that was September 2018. A few months later in 2019, I ran 2:32. I felt like engaging the process again of training and racing and executing, and the race went really well. And it felt pretty easy. And so within a few hours of finishing that race, we're like, oh, we've got a lot more on the table. Like, I've got a lot more, there's a lot of low hanging fruit to still go at that point. And so this was 2019, last year. So that's when Graham and I said, you know what, let's run, not with the goal of making the Olympics, because that had become my whole world between 2018 and 2012. And that really dragged me down and took the enjoyment out of what I was doing in a lot of ways, because you just become so result driven and not, again, process driven. But we thought, with that being in mind of needing to run 2:29:30 to meet the Olympic standard, what do we need to do? And we kind of laid out our year from January last year to ideally October last year, but that didn't happen because of the injury. Of what do I have to do to become a better runner? And if I become a better runner, then the Olympics will probably come as a result of that.
Wow, awesome, thank you.
So yeah, just a quick follow-up on Karen's question. How about 2004? Can you take us all the way back and just walk us through maybe that process, and were you expecting to get to the Olympics in 2004?
Sure, that's a long time ago.
Yeah, I was 8, so I can imagine.
Yeah, so I had just to back it up a little further for context, I had a really great high school career, ran really well, went to Stanford to run and go to school. Had 2 straight years of stress fractures. I had like 4 stress fractures over my first 2 years. So I basically didn't run very much. Took a step away from the sport again, sort of in the middle of my university career. Like I went on a study abroad to Paris, took the semester off of training and racing, came back refreshed. And then, so I did 5 years. So the back half of my time at Stanford, I started to finally hit my groove and be healthy and run well, but it took a long time. When I graduated in 2003, I thought the best, and I knew that 2004 was a year away. I thought the best way for me to make an improvement in running would be to move back to Canada. And my high school coach, Mike, had moved from Kelowna to Calgary in the meantime. So I decided to move to Calgary and work with him again as my coach and go to grad school. So I kind of made the commitment in 2003 that I was going to really like narrow my focus over the next year and just be a really good runner and be a really good student. Because I think in university, one of my problems was which is not uncommon, it was highly distracted by so many things going on in university that maybe are more fun than going to bed at 9 o'clock at night and sleeping 10 hours and getting up and doing runs. And you think you can do it all when you're 19 or 20, right? But then I realized when I was 23 that if I wanted to be a really good runner, I had to actually like go all in. So in 2003, I committed to go all in and yeah, dropped my personal best in the 1500 was 4:10 in university and dropped to 4:02 by that spring, and basically was pretty excited to be on the Olympic team.
And how was that experience in Athens?
It's a bit surreal. Yeah, it's like the Olympics from the outside and the Olympics from the inside are very different beasts. And I think at that age, I was kind of overwhelmed by everything that went on in the Olympic Stadium and in the athletes' village and the level of security and just like my experience of running the race was just mind-boggling because it's this stadium of 100,000 people cheering, which is awesome, but like deafening. Like it's not like anything you've ever experienced before. You can think of like the Stanley Cup final game, you know, when people are screaming the whole game and you're just inundated with stimulus. So I felt like for me, that was a bit overwhelming, how crowded and how noisy and how much energy was there. That was one of those things where I had hoped in 2008 and 2012, I could have taken that experience and grown as an athlete from it. But I was running the race just the whole time going, oh my gosh, it's so noisy. I can't even hear myself think. And so I didn't have the best race in my life, but it was really cool to be there and definitely a memory that I will never forget.
That's so awesome. And those experiences are so great to hear because everyone, it's like it. I've talked to a lot of athletes and a lot of them have very different experiences. And that's and it's great to hear that everyone looks at it as a positive. Jared, is your...
Yeah, I'm good to go. So that being said, you're talking about all these great races. Tell us about a bad race you've had. We always hear about successes. I want to hear about things, how you were able to find through a bad race and how did you deal with it emotionally afterwards?
Oh, trust me, I've had lots of bad races.
Or at least give me one highlight one.
Oh, I've made a lot of dumb decisions in races, and like especially early on where I'm like wasn't very patient, so I pushed the pace too early and really paid for it and really died, like especially in the 1500, well probably in the marathon too, but I haven't had that experience yet where you go out too hard and you just like hit the lactic wall and just the wheels fall off. But I'd say a few races where maybe my head's not in it, and you know, I haven't had very many DNFs, but there's been a couple where I just really struggled to keep the motivation and keep focused. And my last triathlon, actually, I didn't finish. It was the first time that I didn't finish, but it was also the last one that I've done. So I just was like having mental battles with myself all day, and decided mid-race to stop. And I think that's a terrible feeling, and something that as a coach too, like you hate to see an athlete kind of quit mid-race, because it's usually better to just finish even if it's not going well. But when you're in the moment, sometimes you just can't seem to convince yourself that it's worth doing. And I've learned from those experiences too, because you beat yourself up, I think, more for not doing it than if you have a bad result.
Oh yeah. I guess, like, why do you think bad races occur? Because I know a lot of runners would want to know, like, what are the triggers for that?
I think a lot of things. I think that you can't really fake confidence. So like we talk about positive imaging and mental imaging and positive psychology, which I think is all really important. But if you're not feeling ready to race and you don't, you're either not physically prepared or emotionally or mentally prepared, then when you're trying to put it out on the line, then it can be really a really what's the word, like it kind of exposes you if you're actually not ready to race. And so I think if you're mostly physically prepared to race and you've done the training and you're healthy, then your mind follows along. But if things haven't been going well into lead up to a key race, then it's really hard to convince yourself that it's going to go well when it's not. And then you can start to really be at war with yourself.
Okay, so that's where, like, reevaluating is actually a good thing sometimes.
Like reevaluating mid-race, do you mean? Or
like before the race, reevaluating your goals before it even starts.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, being realistic with your goals. And I guess the other thing is we can't always expect to run a personal best or have an amazing race every time. Sometimes you just have to race for the experience of racing. And if you think of, like, if you pull it to the analogy to other sports like soccer, you're not going to go and win every soccer game, but that doesn't mean that the soccer games that you lose or tie as a team aren't learning experiences, and there weren't really good moments within it. But in running, I think we tend to be so results oriented and so judgmental on the performance that unless it was a really good race results wise, it wasn't a valuable race. I think we need to kind of frame the fact that you can still have a race that you learned a lot in or did some good things in, maybe even if you don't have the best result you've ever had. Does that make sense?
Okay, so I think we have time, if you're all right, for one more question. So we'll go to Teresa.
Again, it's a quick one, hopefully. Do you have a mantra that you would repeat to yourself in your head as you run when things are getting tough? And do you, like, encourage your athletes to have one as well?
Oh, that's a really interesting time of because this morning I was running and I was thinking about mantras, and I haven't actually had my athletes specifically work on this, but I have one right now. And I was thinking the evolution of the mantra. So right now mine, and it's posted right here. So you can see it. Let your mind go
to a place of peace.
Yeah. So that's my mantra when I'm running right now, because I'm frankly quite overwhelmed by the situation some days of what's going on in the world. And I've been thinking on my runs, like, that's my time to just try and close off the chatter in my brain. That's not always my mantra, but that's right now what I'm going on. When I was coming back from having my second son and getting into marathon training, it was really, really hard. I was really unfit. And I remember I repeatedly was saying to myself, every step I take is a step closer to fitness. Get me through some terrible runs. And then, back in the day, and this is just funny, Teresa, that you asked this, because I was actually literally
I'm in your head.
yeah, these mantras on the track. I used to think ABC, ABC, ABC when I was running on the track, and I would make each letter stand for an adjective. So it'd be like awesome, beautiful, confident, on repeat. And I think it is sometimes good to just, like, especially if you're feeling like, when you head out for a run, then there's so much going on, to just like you said, find or maybe you implied, maybe you didn't say, but find a mantra that you can focus on. It'll be, maybe that'll be something we can talk about in our team meeting later today.
Awesome. In a couple hours. Awesome. Thank you for that.
I think that's a great spot to finish on. So if you could just remind us, Malindi, where can they follow you on Instagram and Twitter and whatever else you use?
Just my name. I have a very unique name, so there's no other Malindi Elmores around that you need to worry about.
There you go. Anyway, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you. This was awesome.
I think everyone on the call appreciates it. I have been recording this, and I'm going to throw it up to YouTube if you want to watch it again. And then we can share it with those people who maybe wanted to join, but I didn't want to be sending people the link during the thing. So so it'll be up in a few days. And thank you everyone for joining. And you can follow me on social media at Andersen, ANDERSEN_runs. And then you'll see I'm going to try and do more of these in the future, so you can stay tuned.
Thanks for hosting.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this was really cool. A great opportunity. Love it. Thank you.
Thanks again, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Take care.